And sometimes the hurt is so blinding we think we never will see. But just beyond our sight.
Friday is a special celebration of 20 years of programming and the end of the library auditorium, which is being remodeled for expansion. And tonight we're talking about an unusual topic maybe, or at least an unusual combination of guests, and that is artists and politicians, how art can influence politics, and vice versa. And I think you'll recognize everybody on the panel today. So I'm going to introduce them. And Mr. Paul Helmke was our mayor for how many years?
12 years.
12 years.
Mm-hmm.
3 terms, is that
Yep.
correct?
Last I checked.
And
I'm out of there now.
He's out of there now. He's also on our show we did, Letters of the 21st Century, that was put in a time capsule. So it's really good to see you, and really glad to have you on the show. Kate Black is one of Fort Wayne's leading actresses. She's performed in many shows at First Pres, and I imagine other theaters around
every theater in town, I think.
She's also mutual friends with the Makeleys, who started out with Theater for Ideas back in the 70s, and then they got out of the country, not just out of Fort Wayne, they're in Australia.
We played Adam and Eve together, too, actually.
Yeah,
That's
right.
his name.
And Ben Eisbart, who, what offices have you held, Ben?
Oh, I've been on the city council for several terms, and on the school board and
Plan commissions.
plan commission and things of that nature, and also I'm an actor. So I bridge both
Rocky
worlds.
Horror.
Here we
you see.
go.
A
And
Rocky
Ben also
Horror
was,
Show.
Instrumental in making Letter of the 21st Century happen, which, as I said, was put in the time capsule. It was kind of a slice of life of Fort Wayne to celebrate Fort Wayne's birthday. And Mr. Larry Life is chairman of the theater department at IPFW. Larry has been on several programs, including The Artist's Life and Bill of Rights show.
I think I go all the way back, all those, what is it, 20
we go
years?
Back to
Yeah.
Happy Landing, back in a tent down on the landing during the Three Rivers Festival, when we were crowded out by all the beer drinkers across the street.
There was one I was supposed to do with the then mayor of Fort Wayne on censorship and the arts, but I was in Louisiana and my plane didn't make it. It was right after we did.
Yeah, I remember.
That's right
Dan
after we did
Cation-
Hair.
Dan Cation helped with that. So to begin with, I put together a little sampling of shows done over the years. I think they represent actually 4 decades. Let's see, 70s, 80s, 90s, now, yeah, that'd be 4. So, and then we can just come out of that tape and have a freewheeling discussion, solve all of the problems of the world. So we can see the tape, and okay, thank you.
To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of the arts. Okay, so what's he pointing to? I think he's trying to say here that before we even say a word, we need to wake up, and not just be awake to what we feel, but to what others feel.
Talk about standards and community standards, etc. Who is the fine arbiter? That's what, as an artist, that's what worries me.
But we can determine, and again, very few of these works that have had the federal funding, annual funding, have been determined to be controversial. But we're talking about public funds taken from taxpayers.
This is what I want to remember and never forget. That Hitler did not come to power in the notoriously anti-Semitic Poland, nor the pogrom in Russia, but precisely amongst assimilation and sophistication of a modern-day Germany.
So they returned the beatings of great bells and wild trainloads. A few, too few for drums and yells. They creep back silent to still village wells up half-known roads.
And so now we have brought the arts together, have fused music, dance, and composition, have added science and the mystical. We'll dance the comic, and describe it. We'll show you some of the
book I'm going to be doing about Appalachia is finally I'm going to write about something I really love, and that is grandparents. And I want to write about a grandfather, an Appalachian grandfather, raising his grandson to be a mountain man.
I think that's a very important point. Let's get an artist's point of view all the time. Stephen talks every now and then. Can't you see the audio engineer going? I don't know if I can agree with that, Stephen. Let me. I thought it was very clear.
I think there is real value in the arts. It's easy, but you have to do it about 10,000 times. Comes out. So there it is.
I'm sure you love this gentleman. But I'll swear upon it that he loves her. For here is a holy sonnet by his own pure brain.
It's not on the tape. It's on that. Yeah, I wasn't on the tape when I edited it.
So much about that time. And that really scares us.
We have a $9 billion drug program, interdiction education. My belief is if we had a $9 billion arts and education, in particular, arts and education budget, we would need a $9 million drug budget. But I think it's also important to realize that the artist in this country today is speaking for the disenfranchised.
Artists are the eyes and the voice and the hearts of the people.
Stars streaking like a comet across the sky. Eyes that see, ears that hear too much. Sky turns red, blood blue, trees weep, lions whimper, groundhogs roar, voices clatter, chatter, stars come out at noon.
The love that we had, I don't know.
In particular, I'm just feeling sort of down.
About what? I mean, what's bothering you?
I don't know. I guess it's because I'm all alone.
It's an awful night to be alone, all right. You think everybody in the world is out celebrating and carrying on except you.
Even in the darkest moment, there's light. And even when everything is still, there's movement. And when you hear nothing, there's also music.
For somewhere within us, our hearts are always broken over the knowledge of our inevitable ending. Oh, let them be broken over life, not death.
We're back with Theater for Ideas and talking about artists and politicians, the political life, the artist's life, how one can influence the other. And again, I'll introduce my guests, Mr. Paul Helmke, former mayor of Fort Wayne, Kate Black, actress, Ben Eisbart, former office holder, actor, and Mr. Larry Life, chairman of theater department at IPFW. Larry, I'll start with you on that quote, which I'm sorry our audio is a little bad, but you had said the artist speaks for the disenfranchised. Mm-hmm. And you also went on to say that if funding is cut for the arts, the disenfranchised have no voice.
How many years ago did I say that?
How many years ago?
I still believe it. I still think it's true. And I think the arts...
About 10 years ago,
I think it's the charge of the arts to speak for all of the disenfranchised, for all people, all minorities. And we cut funding, and that is a very important voice that is missing. we see it happen all the time, and with the whole idea that politics and the arts, art is political. It always has been, it always will be, and if it's good art, it's political because it's putting ideas out there that a lot of people may not agree with, but ideas that at least need to be given voice and to be heard, and points of view, I think, that need to be heard.
And in many ways, a theatrical setting can give voice to it and help people who would not ordinarily respond to that condition in someone who is living that condition. It can help to bring that condition to life and alive for a person who might not otherwise understand it. It's one of the reasons I am always drawn to plays that are thought-provoking and touching and meaningful, because you are able to give life to that situation or to that character in a way that you know, any Joe Blow sitting in the audience might not otherwise ever have the opportunity to meet that person, and suddenly they are alive in front of them and they can't get away. And of course sometimes you find that we don't have large houses for such plays, but
or we sell them out.
well, sometimes.
It may not be necessarily my viewpoint, or I may not agree with that viewpoint, but that viewpoint has a right to be heard and to be spoken. Yeah. You know, I've often been asked, would I do an anti-Semitic play? And I said, certainly. The greatest anti-Semitic play ever written is The Merchant of Venice. People tend not to believe that's true, but it is. If you look at Elizabethan England, it was a terribly anti-Semitic area, and Shakespeare wrote an anti-Semitic play. And yes, I would do The Merchant of Venice.
I want to ask Ben or Paul about censorship. You know, the Bill of Rights that series was inspired by the photography of Robert Mapplethorpe, which of course was very controversial. A museum in Cincinnati was, I believe, shut down. The museum director was put in jail. In New York, they at least tried to shut down a museum that showed controversial sculptures and so forth, religious themes. How do you deal with that? And you've been in a play too, I know, right? So
been in a few plays.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, where do you draw the line? I mean, once you start saying, like in this piece we saw, Larry had said to Joe Long, who decides? I want to know who makes this decision.
Well, and that's clearly the danger in censorship. I mean, what I might want to censor isn't going to be what you would want to censor. I mean, if you've got your predilections and you're the benevolent dictator of the world, and that's the whole concept behind the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights and freedom of ideas, is that in the marketplace of ideas, you let all ideas compete, and you know, then you can beat down the ones that you disagree with. But if you're not hearing the ideas or seeing the thoughts or being challenged, then you're missing the give and take. And I think that's the important role that arts plays, because, as Larry said, oftentimes the artist needs to speak for the disenfranchised. Our system has always made it tough for someone to be the lonely voice to speak up. And oftentimes what art does is it gives them a way to speak up that is less, surprising enough to people, less frontal of an attack sometimes, because it's clothed in the form of the play or the form of the painting or the form of the poem. But it can still bring the idea, and if the idea is out, then the ideas can compete, and that's really what makes the system work. And that's why you always need to move away from censorship. And obviously that's easier to talk about in theory than in practice, and folks start talking when it's government money, we've got a right to say where it's going to go, or if it's our government facility or whatever. But you know, I think the bottom line needs to be that, again, the interchange, the freedom of ideas is something that makes all ideas stronger after you've been challenged with them.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it really is a very interesting, somewhat dilemma from a political point of view. And those of us that despise censorship and promote the theater for ideas, on the other hand, have a responsibility to those who do not wish their tax dollars to be used to promote things that go opposite their own philosophy. I mean, it's in some way no different than a public service project. And some people want it, some people don't. Does society say, well, you must? And on the other hand, I abhor the censor. So it isn't a simple question. In theory, it's very simple. When you have to press the button and vote, or raise your hand and say aye or nay, it becomes infinitely more difficult.
And there's a lot of interesting interchanges between politics and art and those issues, though, too. It's I mean, at one level, politics is theater, too.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, you'll see especially in discussions of censorship, it's the typical banned in Boston is what helped sell the play or sell the book. And, you know, not to point fingers at other politicians, but you can see some who love the controversy that comes from being the one to play the censor and attack the place and then get the First Amendment thrown back at them. And that's almost, again, a theatrical production that everyone dances around, where you get the notoriety, get the attention
There's one I was
by taking on.
I was involved in a year ago last summer. It turned into political circus. Not only political,
that's a good example, too.
But absolutely a media circus. I mean,
and then you even lose a lot of the is it good artistically?
Exactly.
Is it good theatrically?
That ceased to even
it's
be
almost
mentioned.
the politicians and the politics taking over
and the media jumping on the bandwagon.
Well,
and the issue never really got addressed. People don't know, we're talking about Corpus Christi.
Right.
The issue never got addressed. Is it a good play? What is the quality of the material?
Right.
That never got to be addressed because we were addressing
Well,
everything
the
else.
medium became the message.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It was lost. Everything else.
Actually, I don't think it's a terribly good play. But a student wanted to do it, and I think the student justified why he wanted to do it, and he had every right to do it. I particularly don't like the play that much, but.
Well, and then, I mean, you wonder, are the plays that become controversial then the ones that bring the bigger crowds in, just because folks want to see what's
Don't you think that
I
really
absolutely do.
I absolutely think that's what happened.
A number of years ago, the first time I did Midsummer Night's Dream at the university, and we did photo shoot for the newspaper. And I had the men take their shirts off, and I had the women just wear tube tops. And we just shot everybody from about here up with their entangled, because it's about lovers and mismatched lovers, etc. And they were all wrapped around each other, and the pictures ran in the newspaper. And if you looked at them, it looked like the actors probably didn't have any clothes on, which in point of fact was not true. But I informed the box office, because we started getting calls, is there nudity in the show? And I told the person at the box office just to play dumb and say, I don't really know. I think so, but I'm not sure. We sold out Shakespeare.
Oh, my goodness.
And, you know, my philosophy has always been, I don't care what it takes to get them in. If you can expose them to the play, it doesn't matter what it takes to get them there.
Well, some discussions you see is Shakespeare is you throw in some of the knife play and the in the violence and in the sex or the whatever as part of the reason to draw the crowds in Elizabethan England.
Well, exactly.
It certainly does sell tickets nowadays.
It does, but one of my volunteer roles is with the Civic Theater, and we, and you know, Kate, we're constantly trying to balance out what is good theater and what sells, not in Boise, but in Fort Wayne.
Exactly, sure.
And we default back to the old standards. We tried Wit last year, which is a wonderful play.
It was brilliant.
Brilliant
it was so
play.
Wonderful.
It was a stunning production.
We couldn't even get a sponsor. You know, ovarian cancer, we couldn't get a sponsor for it. But, and Joseph's a fine play, but after you see Joseph 36 times, I mean, there may be something else. Although we're doing Joseph again because it fills the house to allow us to do some other things. So that's also an issue.
Yeah, and you know, we at the university traditionally our department has been known for taking risks and taking chances. I know that we don't look at plays and go, oh, that's going to be controversial, let's do it. But if it ends up being controversial, we don't shy from the controversy. But at the same time, we also do, as you well know, and all theaters in town know, do the musicals. That's your bread and butter. That's your box office. And I love musical theater. Don't get me wrong, it's my forte. But after a while, enough musical theater is enough musical theater, but that's what's going to sell.
And there's different types of art and different things that it does. And some makes you feel good, some challenges you, some makes you ask questions, some's just entertaining.
It makes you angry.
Yeah, makes you. Getting back to Corpus Christi, I know Mark Souder actually.
Who?
I think his name is Mark Souder.
I don't know who that is. No idea.
No comment.
No comment.
I must be the
I
only
think
one
he
who
was
knows.
defining for you as
He's what?
He was defining in the newspaper what a theater department should do, not just whether the play should be performed, but I read it something where he was saying this is what a theater department should be doing. I mean, where should politicians draw the line? I mean, I don't think should they be sticking their nose in somebody else's even, you know, he runs the theater department.
Well, I think the bigger question is not just a theater department and with politicians or politics, but what is the role of a university?
Okay, good.
What is a university supposed to be doing? That's a better question.
Yeah, okay.
Well, take the opposite of that, though, and say, we are a representative democracy. He represents a constituency. If he were silent, would he be representing his constituency?
But who does he really? I mean, I have a problem.
And it does get tricky because
That's a good point,
it's I think I mean, one of the things I've always felt is that there needs to be more public support for arts, and I mean, cities that require a certain percent of public construction projects, for example, to go into public art. I think those make a lot of sense in some areas, and we could use more public art and focus on the arts, I think, here in this community. So on one hand, we want governmental officials to play a role in supporting the arts and stressing the arts, and the arts are the soul of a community. But if we're going to do that, then if they feel it's representing the dark side, then we shouldn't be surprised if they speak up either. And hopefully arts are going to be strong enough to do it. I mean, on that specific case, I think with the role of the university, a student program, it wasn't appropriate because, in a sense, it becomes threatening in terms of funding from the legislature, funding from others, and that's where I get concerns. And I'm always concerned when people comment about things that they haven't seen. I mean, I'm not the best critic in the world, but I like to see it or read it before I'm going to have an opinion on it.
I think the other issue then that comes up too, then we're going back to the Corpus Christi, which seems to crop up all the time, was an issue of people complaining who had not read the play, or if they had read the play, not knowing how to read a play. And it's not, I will be the first to admit, it's not an easy play to read because there are 13 characters in it and they play multiple roles. And you have to, even my first time through it, I had to go back and go, now which one is this? So, and a lot of that came from what I would call not people being ignorant, but ignorant of the piece and what the piece was saying.
It's, you know, you get these same issues and other things. I know, I mean, not to bring up other things, actually, the year I was running for mayor back in '87, I was also on the board of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, and they had some show that had some painting, and that basically was showing a missile that was seen as a phallic symbol to some veterans groups, and I think it was painted in the flag's colors or whatever, so it was seen as an affront to the flag. And again, you know, not probably a piece of art I'd want to hang in my home, but part of a show that they're doing, and protests outside the museum, and some of the same questions raised. And we got some of the same things in the community when we had some of the large twisted steel sculptures and other things outside, and not so much in terms of being offensive.
But is it art?
But ugly.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
ugly.
And again, people have different tastes, and part of the role of art is to challenge, to get you to think,
beyond,
what does this stand for? What else could it stand for? Why does it say that to you? What does it say to someone else? What does it make you think of? And you know, maybe it's a phallic symbol. Maybe it's just a missile. Maybe it's
and you know what happens?
It's a cigar. You know,
what happens to the old thing of, if you don't, now I know we can get to the taxpayers' money thing too. We get that, but my tax dollars are going places I don't particularly want them to go. We can argue that forever.
Yeah.
But whatever happened to the old, if you don't agree with it and you don't like it, you don't have to see it, but don't deny someone else that wants to see it the right to see it. I don't go certainly don't go when the Klan rallies in downtown Fort Wayne. But it is the right, they have freedom of assembly, and it is their right to have a rally in downtown Fort Wayne.
Yeah, on the public streets, at a public place, and required the expenditure of a lot of public funds in terms of the police and the sheriffs to make sure the disruptions aren't occurring. And again, that's our tax dollars going to those things. It is expensive, it's offensive to have freedom of speech and freedom of ideas. And that's part of what our community is about.
It's a really good point.
Part of what we stand for as a nation.
Right.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. It's what this country was founded on. So.
Talk a little bit about the interaction between you, the performer, and the audience. You know, we've talked about the politicians, or politics is art, art is politics, but the interaction, and also as if you're giving a speech versus performing, what is there a difference in that interaction? Or
I've only done a few small roles at First Presbyterian Theater and some things like that. I've always said that in my view it's a lot harder to be an actor than it is a politician. That when I'm a politician and I'm giving a speech, I can say whatever I feel like saying, I'll ramble on, I'll do this. When you're an actor, you kind of have to follow the lines in the play. When I'm a politician, basically I've got the stage to myself. I don't have to interact and wait till someone else says their lines. An actor has to, you can't just keep talking the whole time. You've got dialogues and 13 characters.
We have to tell a story.
And
you do
I mean, I can tell
story.
stories, but you have to tell them with other people there. And when I'm a politician, I basically stay at one spot or roam around a little bit. When you're an actor, you have to be able to walk and talk at the same time. So I always felt it's a lot tougher to be an actor.
We hope.
So that's the politician's view.
From my point of view, I've been doing work on stage for 31 years, and I just finished doing a role that was unlike any role I've ever done before, and that was Molly Sweeney, in which I had to sit in a chair for 2 hours, and I had to hold the audience with me and tell my story sitting in a chair. And the most exciting thing I did all evening was stand up and describe dancing around my kitchen, flinging my arms from side to side, and that was, you know, but it was so surprising to the audience that I could feel them connect with me and go with me to that place because it was so different. And it was really exciting to be able to perform in that capacity. I had probably about half or more of the 2 hours plus of dialogue. And I could feel them with me. I knew they were there. There was humor in the play. It was very thought-provoking. I played a woman who is blind, and so I had to find a way to shift my eyes so that they looked like they didn't see, and that was a challenge too. It had lots and lots of challenges that were wonderful and new to approach. And the people who saw it, it was not particularly well attended, but God love all the people who saw it, because they were absolutely with us from the start to the finish. And there were three of us on stage, Manny Silverman and Mike Palmrooter and I, and we never really looked at one another, spoke to one another. Okay, it was I was speaking to the audience. You know, the audience was listening, and they were my confidant. They were my ear. And it was very exciting on a lot of levels. But
That's got to be a great feeling.
Oh, it was a thrill. It was absolutely a thrill. I felt so connected to that woman.
Kate brings up an interesting point too that I think is very important to artists in Fort Wayne, and particularly I guess theater artists. There is this concept, and we all know our survival is based on putting butts in the seats, and that's just an expression that is used: put the butts in the seats. But there are certain things that may not put the butts in the seats, but as long as it brings out the people that want to see it and want to think about it. And I think of wit, especially, and Molly Sweeney, which you are referring to. And I think those are what we always say at the university is, and I have to play the devil's advocate when we pick a season, I will always say, okay, let's start with, tell me what the big names are going to be, because that's going to make our money, so we can do we're doing an Irish play written by one of Ireland's leading female playwrights, the Mai. We are pretty sure it's not going to be a big seller, but Macbeth was. We're doing She Loves Me, a musical, which will pay for the art, if you will, the artistic ventures that we want to do.
Okay, what you were saying, Ben, about Joseph and.
Well, one of the things that's important to me as an actor, but I know it's important to people out there, I mean, audience members out there, they may not be many, but there are people who come to see plays like that. There are people in Fort Wayne who aren't particularly interested in Joseph, and they stay home when Joseph plays because they've seen it before or they just don't want to see it again. And even though we don't have massive droves of people running out to see Molly Sweeney or the Mai, there are people who are running out to see it, and it matters to them. And I know there were people who came to see it who had not been to First Presbyterian Theater before, and who sat there and said, "Oh my goodness, this is theater worth looking at. These are people who care about what they're doing. This has quality. It's worth witnessing. Maybe I should come here again." So one by one, we're changing minds. We're pulling people in. And when people see theater of quality at any theater, at the Civic and at IPFW and at Arena and First Pres, it makes it better for the whole theater community.
Absolutely.
It enlivens the whole community because it shows everyone who's watching that it is worth going to the theater. They don't have to go to the movies to see something that's worthwhile and entertaining. They might even see someone they know on stage, and that could be really exciting because they somehow own it more.
I think sometimes people view the varying theaters in Fort Wayne as competitive, and we're not.
We certainly shouldn't be.
We are not in
I
competition
don't like
really
to think of
with
it
each
that
other.
way.
There is no way we could ever, all of us, pick seasons.
If you get excited about going to one thing, you're going to get excited about going to the other.
And none of us can pick a season that won't be, nights of performance won't be in competition with other theaters.
One thing that strikes me, I hadn't thought about this before. Well, I mean, first, one similarity from the politician side to the actor side is, I mean, part of the thrill, I think, for anyone in politics is the interaction. I mean, one of the reasons I think a lot of people hopefully get into politics is that you like people, you want to interact with people, and it's the exchange that you get, and that's got to be part, particularly of live theater, as well as a political speech or a neighborhood speech or whatever you're doing. But the other thing that occurred to me is that you're dealing with centuries of plays and background, and occasionally we'll try, I mean, not just Shakespeare, but other older plays. I don't hear any politicians giving William Jennings Bryan's 3-hour speech to the 1896 Democrat Convention, which brought down the House then, but people don't listen to that anymore. Whereas, you know, so in politics, you don't see the old stuff tried. I mean, it's now short, 30 seconds.
Although, Paul, there are, there are snippets of the Gettysburg Address or...
Well, the Gettysburg Address is short. That can still be delivered.
But William Jennings, that will not play in Fort Wayne.
And you don't dare do Shakespeare without cutting him. I mean...
That would be true.
Well, it's attention spans, whether it's for politics, issue debates.
Well, it's language also. I mean, it's tuning the ear and a discipline. And unless you study it or unless you desire to go to it to then sit through it, I mean, you simply can walk away because I don't understand it. You know, I think you brought up a good point, or someone did here about competing theaters and all. It's clear to me the more that I'm involved in the Civic that we certainly aren't competing. We complement.
Absolutely.
From the theme of the program tonight, though, the Civic receives no federal dollars, no tax dollars at all. We are funded by the box office, by grants, by memberships and donations. And as a result, we take less of a cutting edge for, as a generalization, because we have to, as you say, put the butts in the seats to then afford the luxury of doing a wit once a season, which is cutting edge for us. The dilemma that creates is with the actors, the actresses, the directors who really want to do things on that stage, and we say, yes, but let's do Sound of Music. well, but let's do My Fair Lady. Now, they're wonderful shows, and they sell. But for the, and Kate can speak to that infinitely better than I, for the actor or the actress, you have to stretch me more than that. And we find ourselves unable to do that because the cash flow does not allow the lights to stay on if we do cutting edge.
My sense, and I'm no artistic expert, but is that we've got a pretty vibrant artistic community here, though. I mean, the symphony's strong.
Now this is my
the theater's strong.
This is my
the art
33rd year
very
here
good,
in
the
this
ballet's
town,
been good,
and it is amazing to me in 33 years how much art we have in this community compared to where we were even 20 years ago.
Oh, right.
Can I ask a question of all of you in terms of whether you feel that things have changed dramatically in terms of numbers of people in the audiences since 9/11? Do you think that has impacted things a lot?
I think it's a really good question, Kate. I think we're seeing more people wanting to go to arts events, wanting to go to theater. We have, as awful as 9/11 was, it has drawn people together and has made us realize that we are a community, I think. I hope, please God. And I think that one of the ways to be part of a community is to sit in a theater, that darkened house, and become one with those people on stage.
Yeah, I agree. It just seems to me, and I may not, I certainly don't have figures on it or anything, but it seems to me that plays that are humorous, plays that are musical, have appealed to the public more since then. And I think it's been a little more difficult for people to get real excited about going to something very serious.
I think what'll be interesting is when we start to see plays that have themes built more around 9/11. I guess Neil LaBute's got a new play out that touches on something just
There's a wonderful one called For the Guys, which I'm trying to get a hold of, that was done by Sigourney Weaver's husband, and she was in it in New York. And it's a two-person play, and it's the head of a firehouse in New York who hires a woman who is a writer and a publicist to write eulogies for all of his men who were lost in 9/11.
We may be still, and my instinct is that we're still too close to the moment.
I think you're right.
There's healing that has to take place and perspective.
It's like, I guess this Neil LaBute play is something like The Morning After, and it's somebody who's supposed to have been in the Trade Center and wasn't there because he's carrying on an affair with his boss, and so then he's not dead when the wife family thinks he is, and how does he explain? Now, does he let him know that he's still alive? How does he explain where he was?
So it's Neil is such an interesting man, my goodness.
Which is interesting because, again, he was here, and I think a lot of folks don't realize that that's something special. But then the article I was reading was talking about how, one of the sort of thoughts is, how do you turn a tragedy into something where it's just incidental in a marital fight? But you look at From Here to Eternity, or other movies or plays or books that have come out of Pearl Harbor or the Holocaust or other things, and I think that's part of how we deal with tragedies too, is to around the edges.
If you use Broadway as a template recently for this, certainly the big splashy musicals, the producers, Hairspray, Thoroughly Modern Millie, these are the shows that people want to go see because I think they need it. What happened during the Great Depression?
Esther Williams.
If it hadn't been for the Great Depression, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers would have been
Singing in the Rain.
Nobody, possibly.
But there also needs to be, at this time, I think, people sort of opposing the popular opinion that's come out of 9/11, this drumbeat of war, and getting back to your idea about the marketplace. The concern is that the marketplace can drown out the kinds of plays we're all talking about at a time when they're most needed.
Well, it's interesting when they're most needed. I heard a snippet on NPR right after the Taliban were thrown out, and one of the first things that developed was the theater in Afghanistan. And it was very cathartic. It was almost a psychological approach to an issue where they reenacted the years of oppression on stage. They cleaned up the theater. They, the paintings that were hidden, the sculpt, because it wasn't terribly popular at the time, and they dusted them off, built them, and then they acted out and all of their life experiences, which they couldn't.
It's really,
Very
and that's why arts are crucial to a community, and why I think arts deserve public support and governmental support. They speak to the soul of a community, and they help you work through issues. They help you understand yourself. And if we're just about houses and factories, what's there? I mean, there's more to an individual life than the work they do. There's more to a community's life than the things they produce, and that's what the arts speak to. And I think it's appealing to our better natures.
And I think with that, along that same line, Paul, is sometimes art, and oftentimes art will produce outrage within a community, and that has to be okay.
Yeah.
One of the little different slant on part of this discussion, but one of the interesting theories that's come out lately with regard to economic development, community development in a way, is this fellow by the name of Richard Florida, who's got this book out about the rise of the creative class. And basically, he had an excerpt of this in Washington Monthly, and the subtitle was "Why Communities with Gays and Rock Bands Are in Effect Beating All the Others." And it's arguing that we need communities that are friendly to arts, that are friendly to creative people, and not just artists, but create people. I mean, the economy is becoming an economy where it's not your muscle that's the crucial factor anymore. It's people's brains and how they sort through things, whether that's doctor, lawyer, whatever. And to get people that are creative, you need to show that you're tolerant, that you're open. And one of the ways you signal this is through your support of the arts.
Exactly.
And these are folks, the creative people can go to Austin, can go to Seattle, can go anywhere. And what they're looking for real quickly is this a community where I can fit in, where I can plug and play quickly. And
interestingly enough, I had heard something, and this is completely rumor, but I had heard, because we were trying to attract different kinds, diverse kinds of people to Fort Wayne, to develop Fort Wayne, that a lot of, and this is just something I heard, a lot of gay people were very turned off to coming to Fort Wayne after the whole outrage at Corpus Christi. Did not make them feel comfortable.
Oh, I don't doubt.
I probably, if I didn't live in Fort Wayne, I would think twice about coming, but certainly I...
this Florida, his themes are you need communities that value talent, value technology, and value tolerance.
Diversity.
And if you don't have the tolerance as well as the talent and the technology, it's not going to sell. It's not going to work.
And you don't attract people
uptown. And part of it is don't just try to attract the business. If you attract the people, then they'll be creating businesses, they'll be giving follow-up businesses or repetitive businesses or spin-off businesses, whatever that will allow the community to thrive. And we haven't had the focus on that. I think that we need
How
to.
can we implement that? I'm ready. Let's do it. No kidding.
Well, actually, the downtown task force that just recently, I think yesterday, revealed the various pods and districts, spoke to the issue of Florida, Richard Florida, and in fact, I think he's coming to town in March. March.
And IPFW.
At IPFW.
And
for us.
Well, that's where it's Invent
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is the group that's bringing him in. But,
and one of the districts is a creative district, an arts district that would promote this sense of creativity, this climate that would attract people who then obviously would feel comfortable here, and then either business would follow or they would create business. So I think we've moved a bit.
Let's just, for probably maybe 10 minutes left, I had found a quote I read on the Bill of Rights, and I didn't get time to really look it up, but basically it was by Ernest Hemingway, who said, this is a bad paraphrasing, but the artist, the writer, is always against his government or her government, and the government is always against the artist. I really haven't heard that tonight. I think this has been a fascinating discussion, but what's your feeling about that? I mean, I think he feels like the government is always a sort of a censor to the artist.
I don't think it has to be an always against. I think a government is probably always going to be threatened at some level by art, just because, again, it's something that's challenging, it's something that's different, it's something that government a lot of times doesn't want people thinking in different ways. So there could be some tension there. But I think when you look back historically, I mean, some of the greatest periods in history, I mean, Florence during the Renaissance, I mean, the Medici were the government, and they were the sponsors of the Michelangelos and the others that were creating the great art.
But they weren't elected, Paul.
No. But it shows that interchange at different times can mean a lot to a community. I've traveled to Florence a few years ago and had a meeting with the mayor, and he's in, his office is where the Medici were. I mean, and you've got, all the paintings down the hall and David across the street.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember a time when I've ever just unilaterally agreed with the government in my life. I don't agree with the government, but I've never thought that the government per se was out to get my art or stop my art. I'm a Catholic, and I don't agree with the Pope, God knows. And I don't have to agree with the Pope. There is no dictum that I have to agree with the Pope.
Well, and it's I mean, part of my sense is that it's particularly governments that are supposed to be democratic or more representing the people should be supportive of the arts, because arts are reflecting the feelings and hopes, dreams, souls of the people too, in all their contradictions, and should fit. When you have a repressive government, it's obviously going to be challenged by art. And just as religion is it's sometimes going to, organized religion, and sometimes in the past has encouraged art, other times has tried to repress it. Actually, organized art has tried to repress subversive art or avant-garde art or whatever is seen as different too. I think any institution can feel threatened by something different to it. And art itself can be an institution that feels threatened by new ways of doing things.
Don't you think, though, that if the federal government were more supportive in terms of NEA funding, if we hadn't gotten all unglued about Mapplethorpe and all of that business, if we still had a situation where there was reasonable funding going out to these organizations, that would color and change the way the public feels about going to the theater, about going to museums, about it seems to me that the fact that funding has been so dramatically reined back can't but have an effect on how the public out there, the general public, because artistic people are going to go to the theater. People who are interested, but just anybody sitting in their living room could choose to go to the theater or stay at home and watch a movie. But if it's being discussed, if there's funding so that people can advertise more completely, if it's out there and available to them in a different way.
It's almost a double negative. You've got less financial support, therefore less new plays being written, new art being created, etc. Then the other part of the double negative, though, is that in effect, by saying that art is bad or conveying that art is bad, it discourages people from even wanting to go see something.
Right, and so it just
which
seems
is the opposite of what you should be doing.
In terms of what you asked, is government, against us? In those terms, yes.
I mean, at one level, it would have almost been healthier never to have had government support, so they couldn't have said, we don't want the money going there, which is the sort of the critique.
But since we did have, and the other thing is, aren't there just countries all over Europe that are enormously funded? I mean, I know that there is a huge amount more funding from countries that don't have nearly the
Other countries realize its importance, again, to the soul of a city, the soul of a community.
Exactly.
And it's particularly important, I mean, this is one of the things, I was active with a group called the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and one of our top priorities as mayors really was supporting the arts, because in cities around the country, regardless of size, you look at what it is that helps strengthen a city, and it's again the creative type issues we talked about before, but part of it is just the idea that, when people don't go to the suburbs to see the plays or see the art museums or hear the poetry readings, they're going to the cities. Whether it's a New York or a Fort Wayne or whoever, that's generally where the art is going to be produced, displayed, and that helps strengthen a community.
It's part of the glue. It's
and
absolutely part of the glue for our souls and for our economy.
But I think it will always come back to my tax dollars. And if my tax dollars are being used to fund that which I don't agree with,
Yeah.
that which I don't like,
God.
then, you know.
The things that we produce here in Fort Wayne are
terribly unfortunate.
are
but
so.
And really, most
I mean,
of the
we do
tax dollars.
so much mainstream. We've had maybe one. Corpus Christi is probably the most controversial thing that's been done in what, the last 10 years?
Yeah, then there was Bent before that.
Yeah.
There was Hair.
Jesus Christ Superstar was controversial.
Oh, it was
First time
when
I
we
did
it.
The
Yes,
first,
it
you were in
certainly-
it.
I was in it.
Yeah, the first time we did it, we had pickets.
Yeah,
People
it was
praying
huge.
rosary.
Now
out.
it's something that the church groups do.
Now it's
Oh, of
passe,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody does it now.
I forgot.
Everything old is new again.
There you go.
Well, I just, you know, given that the things that get done in Fort Wayne are really very, very reasonable. We're all careful how we choose our seasons, right?
Oh, very careful.
We're not stupid. So, you know, it just seems to me like if we're going to get down to my tax dollars shouldn't be used for that, I just think, you know, it's okay to put your money where your mouth is. If you like it, go see it. Don't, you know, I just think.
But the irony is, you
The
know,
more we
it's-
support-
Oh, I agree 100% with you, but it's still that which is viewed as going against my religion, my belief system, whatever. The irony too there is you can do something like, if you will, a Corpus Christi, but note that we also did Macbeth this year, in which there is the slaughter of innocent children and the murder of innocent people, but nobody gets upset about Macbeth.
Witches.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, we're about out of time,
Not that I want
you're going to get the last word in this studio because this is it. So not to put pressure on you, but we have about 5 minutes remaining. So why don't we just kind of give?
Well, I think it's almost the title of your program for the 20 years says it all. I mean, theater for ideas. I mean, the theater is for ideas. Art is for ideas, and it again challenges us to become better people. And if nothing else, by understanding why we believe what we believe and why we reject something that we find offensive, and perhaps finding out that maybe we don't understand why we believe what we believe. If nothing else, it should get people to understand what it means in America to have a Bill of Rights, what the rights of a minority are versus the rights of a majority. Folks don't fully understand those concepts until they see them in true conflict. And better to have the conflict, I think, over an argument of art than, you know, tearing down the government and doing a revolution. It's the way that you understand what you're all about. And that's, again, your theater has done that.
Absolutely.
The theaters here have done it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's I continue to believe that Fort Wayne is an incredibly exciting place to live. And obviously I've stayed here long enough and continue to stay here, and I think that it's very exciting. You know, you do a play and there's going to be some controversy over it. So what? You move on. And maybe the controversy rattled some cages and shook some people up, and hey, that's what we're supposed to be about. But, you know, I've lived here 33 years. Kate came back to live here. I think it's a very exciting place artistically. I really do.
Thank you.
And I would think this is a fitting end, at least to this portion of Theater for Ideas. I mean, clearly over the years, you've presented a forum that allowed the interchange of a whole host of thoughts and viewpoints that may not be very common on the main street of our town, but nonetheless were well stated, necessary to hear, and I think very, very stimulating. And I think if you reflect, as I reflect on the topic of tonight's Strange Bedfellows, really I don't think government and theater, government and culture, our government and theater here is really at odds for the most part. I think for both see the greater good, and that's again the beauty of democracy here.
Thank you, Ben. Kate.
Well, I think it is a wonderful forum. This has been a wonderful forum for all these years, and the theater continues to be a forum where people can see things that will open their eyes to new ways of looking at issues that they are unfamiliar with. And I encourage all of our listeners to go out to all of the theaters in Fort Wayne and see what is there and what is available. And speak to your politicians about support.
We're doing the vagina monologues with the Women's Bureau March the 1st.
And we're doing Annie.
We got to have the Annie.
The yin and the yang.
It's all right. It'll be
And
a
we're
great.
just doing elections again.
Doing elections.
Don't you guys ever get tired of that?
It's a long-running show. Seems to come back. Getting less people in the seats, but I don't know.
I hear you.
Well,
Change
what a
the
wonderful, fitting last show for Theater for Ideas over these last 20 years. Larry Life, Ben Eisvart, Kate Black, Paul Helmke, and you all have described Theater for Ideas better than I can. The understanding to try to foster an exchange of ideas, to create a better understanding, to promote the awareness that you've all discussed tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary.
And may love gently reach you under starry skies. May the wind be